Hello and welcome to this episode of Humans Behind AI, where, as you know, we explore, we probe, and we learn from the fascinating entrepreneurs who are building organizations in the field of artificial intelligence, data analytics, and such. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to invite two such entrepreneurs, Tim Berry and Patrick Hennessy, who are building a very interesting firm, Blend 360. So, without much ado, let's dive in, let's probe, let's learn from them, and let's ask some interesting questions. Thank you very much for doing this video cast. This is more story about Patrick, you, Tim, and your families and your teams, less about just business strategies, although they interact. Tim, Patrick, just tell us a little bit about what in your own framework and words, what's your who you are, what brought you to this position, how did your partnership evolve, um, just a backdrop of your story. That'll be great for us to hear from you.
Blend 360 is has the goal of becoming the premier AI services provider servicing the Fortune 5,000. The company was started in 2017. It is now north of $100 million in revenue. It is in the US, it's in EMEA, it's in India, so multinational. It's got 1,000 plus people that do data analytics, technology, and BI kind of services for our clients. And I guess the last point is the 75% plus of the revenue of Blend 360 comes from the Fortune 500.
This is more story about Patrick, you, Tim, and your families and your teams, less about just business strategies, although they interact. So this is a little bit more about you. And one thing I didn't tell you in the questions I sent you, there's a rapid fire at the end of it, which is you get 10 seconds to answer, and obviously you have no clue what those questions are. So we will keep last 10 minutes for 5 minutes for that. But with that, Tim, Patrick, just tell us a little bit about what in your own framework and words, what's your who you are, what brought you to this position, how did your partnership evolve, just a backdrop of your story. That'll be great for us to hear from you.
Yeah, good. Good. Tim, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
All right. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then why don't you can add to that and how we came together. But my story is one I actually am of a family of statisticians. So my dad is a PhD level statistician, as a professor, still does work at MD Anderson and in cancer work. And anyway, growing up, I got exposed to statistics and through various evolutions of my schooling, I ended up as decided, well, maybe I'll get into that career as well. I ended up with a master's degree from the University of Minnesota in statistics. I think today we call that either data science or AI, as that term has kind of become outdated. And ended up, one of the things I really enjoyed about the world of statistics was being able to apply my knowledge and then find an area where I could know if I was right or not. And we would predict things, and then I'd see if we were right. And so I took a job at AT&T Bell Labs, applying some of those statistical techniques to marketing areas. Really enjoyed that. Ended up going to a marketing agency at Rapp Collins. Didn't love, to be honest with you, I didn't love the agency world. It was at that time, that was in the mid 90s, a long time ago. And it was more about the media and the creative than it was the analytics. And I felt like a little bit of a fish out of water there. And where they would, when someone wanted to know about analytics, they'd trot me out. They'd show I'd present something, and then they'd put me behind my desk until I was asked again to speak. And so, but ended up at a small company called Merkle, and that's where I met Patrick. And my job there was to build our analytics group. Patrick's job was to build the sales organization. we started to do pitches together to our clients, kind of hit it off really nicely. He brought a certain capability, I brought a certain capability. And then we decided about 2 years into that to join forces and start to build a group. And from a business partnership perspective, we've always been connected here. And so I'll pause there and let Patrick kind of either keep telling the story, because that was in 1996 1995 or 1997, somewhere in the 90s, we joined forces here. So
yeah. I'll give a little of my background, Puneet, and I'll be able to kind of take where Tim left off and fast forward us to Blend 360. But my path is a little bit different than Tim's, where I studied history in college. And I came out of the workforce not really knowing what I was going to do, but I just kind of had this. I heard that, boy, if you go into sales, you can make good money in sales. And so I found a sales position, and eventually I found my way into this thing called data processing, helping people kind of do direct mail better by kind of using an IBM mainframe, merging different lists together, cleaning them up so people could do their marketing. So that was kind of my path into kind of the, I guess what we now call the AI world. Was the early beginnings was really around direct mail. Dare I say, people used to call it junk mail back in the day. And but what had happened is, when I found that job, I was with a small company, and when I went out and sold our services to clients, I then it was a kind of an eat what you kill mentality. I had to make sure that work went really well back in the shop. And in the early days, the work wasn't going so well. So I took some computer programming classes. I got really good at what they call today kind of the CDI, customer data integration kind of approach. And I really got familiar and kind of fell in love with the use of technology, helping people drive kind of marketing outcomes. So that was, I know some of our discussion will be, where do you find your passion? Sometimes it's just trying some things out. And all of a sudden I found this thing. I'm like, wow, I love this. I love using computers to help people drive business outcomes. So I had done that job for about 6 years with this small company. I was really interested in having equity and kind of my own company. And when I approached the firm about, hey, would there be a path for me to do that? They said, no, there wasn't going to be a path. So I said, okay, well, if that's not going to happen, I'm going to have to kind of find my own way. So didn't think I was ready for my own company at that point. And I found this company called Merkle that was looking for help with some salespeople. And that's how Tim and I first got engaged. Was Tim was actually working for Merkle, building the analytics group. I came in to interview for a sales management position, and Tim was on my interview panel. So we first got in kind of to the discussions back then. And I remember early days, I loved my conversation with Tim, because back in the day, it wasn't clear if the money you spent on analytics could have the return on investment. So yeah, Tim could build you a model. That model could make some predictions, and it would help you optimize your marketing efforts, right? But the $20,000 it was going to cost to build a model wasn't always yielding $20,000 of value for the customer. So it was early days in analytics. And so Tim and I had a great debate and discussion around, how could analytics actually work, and could we make it work? So right from the get-go, I think we had some kindred spirits around, we were passionate about this, but we need to figure out a way to kind of make it work. So as Tim and I became partners in Merkle, it was funny, because we decided to kind of join forces and build out a capability. And people said, who's going to work for who? And we're like, nobody's going to work for anybody. We're just going to work together, and we're going to build this thing out. And it's always confused people a little bit, that approach. But if you truly have a partnership, it's not who's working for who. It's how do we kind of create a vision, and how do we go execute on that? So we became really good partners. And, to tell you how thick our partnership was back then, is the company we were at had an executive team, and we were on a growth rate. We went from 15 million in revenue to a company went to north of $1 billion. And I can remember being in an executive meeting, and two of the other executives were arguing with me about something. So we're having a big debate. And Tim sits down next to me and he says to the other two guys, "You're wrong." And then he looks at me, he says, "What are we talking about?" So he was willing to take my side and tell them they were wrong. So anyway, so Puneet, I want to fast forward because I know it's taken a long time, but Tim and I we worked together, for the better part of 20 years together at Merkle, and served as co-presidents with a great CEO, David Williams. We had a really good run there. And as Merkle was recapitalizing the company, it became clear it was going to be selling that company to Dentsu. In that process, I had said to our CEO, David Williams, that, look, I really want, I had such a good run at Merkle. I lost the focus of starting my own company, my own firm. And I said, I think, I was 50-ish years old. And I said to David, I got to go do this thing now. If I don't go do this thing now, it's never going to happen. So I said to Tim, why don't we join forces, build this killer data and analytics company using technology that's broader than marketing, because that's where we want to go in our career. Merkle became this killer digital kind of agency using data tech and analytics. And so we told Tim was all in. We talked to David about it, and he was kind of a supporter of us starting Blend 360 back in 2017.
Sure. So, Patrick, you gave me like two key angles I wanted to cover in this discussion, because every set of entrepreneurs, or sometimes individuals, bring some very unique angle. Two things I wanted to, and you kind of set it up so well, hence I'm interrupting you, is that one, I wanted to bring in the angle of partnership, because there is, various various entrepreneurs, which is or budding entrepreneurs, which is one of the audiences of this podcast. They always have this kind of different type of advice. One saying that partnerships are designed to kind of later on paths diverge, but partnerships are great because they give you motivation, all the good things. So one point I would just leave it to you, so that throughout the discussion you can bring it up as appropriate, is the value, the essence, the challenges of partnership. And the second thing is, there is a certain type of entrepreneurs which start out of college or very early in their career. But from you, one thing I took away, which I wanted to bring to the entrepreneurs who are, call it mid to senior executive stage entrepreneurs, because their challenges, both family, risk, and what they leave on the table is different, right? When you are 30 years old, maybe you leave less on the table. And here you leave more on the table, and you probably feel in your heart that they are lesser shots. You can't really, try it for 6 years, then go back, pick up the job with Google. I mean, that's just certainly not the mindset. So please keep educating us on those two themes: partnership and the stage of life at which you started the company. Because my next point here was that, just tell us a little bit about, because one thing that you hear in social media, Instagram, TikTok, about this passion, right? Find your passion, do what's your passion. So tell us a little bit about, where did that play a role in both your starting Blend 360 and continuing Blend 360? Where is this passion object in your journey?
I can kind of give an answer here, and then Tim could kind of chime in. But I think, the passion in the way kind of in my life, the way I like to think about it is like vision, mission, purpose. I have to have a vision, mission, purpose, right? And and I got this saying, you got to make it all work. So it's not just being successful in business that's important. It's being successful in your personal life, with your family, with your friends, kind of living a good life. And yet you also have this desire to be successful in business. So for me, the passion wasn't really about money, so to speak. Now, money's an important kind of metric, because to be successful, when you're successful in business, there's obviously that correlation that's there. But I think from the early days, I just had a passion about building a business. And I had a passion about it being people-based, right? And then I kind of found this thing early in my career around the data, the tech, and the analytics, that just something was like, wow, I love this. And I think it's really powerful. I don't know how to do it exactly myself, but I love when I get to work with guys like Tim and other people that could start to apply that mathematical mindset to figuring things out. So, I think someplace kind of being in tune for your own journey, what you think your vision is, what you think your mission is, what you find your own purpose in, and and kind of being in tune with that. And then I think just trying things out in your life to know what you like and what you don't like. And, at the stage of my career where we started Blend, and after having a successful exit at Merkle, there were options that Tim and I could do that didn't have to build a company and didn't have to worry about generating a lot of income. It was more about what is it we want to do over the next 5, 10, 15 years that would be energizing to us and that we would, just find some fulfillment in if we could do a really good job. So for me, it was more about that as Merkle was transitioning. I'm like, what is it I want to do? What's my vision, mission, and purpose over the next 5, 10 years? And then how do I take a shot at something?
Shouldn't be surprised. Pretty aligned with what Patrick was saying there. As I think about young people coming out in my career and where the passion was early in my career, it kind of had two dimensions to it. And the first dimension was what I was doing. Right? I brought it up a little bit earlier, which is I got excited by the fact that using an example, when I worked at AT&T Bell Labs, we created a model that predicted the likelihood that someone would leave AT&T and go to the competition. And we scored that entire universe. And then I got to watch over the next 3 or 4 months to see if we were actually right. So we would say that this person's going to leave, and then we'd watch to see if they left. That's where I got a ton of passion, which is what I was doing as an individual to say, hey, I've spent all this time, in education, in theory, in books, and then I get to now go to an environment where I get to apply that and I get to see that actually in action. So that drove my passion. And the other side of that dimension that drove the passion is the people you work with. And so I found that passion in one area, but the people I work with didn't have that passion. And that wasn't a great environment for me. So if you can find kind of what you're doing, feel good about the impact, you're willing to stay up late at night to work because you don't see it as work, you see it as something you'd rather do than watch TV. That's a great area. And then if you can find the people that you really like to work with, don't underestimate that.
No, Tim, that's very, very useful summary you gave, and I'll tie it just for the sake of summary for the audiences. Patrick, I'm tying with what Tim said about things that you can stay up for with the people that you really love. But probably to find that, I'm reflecting on both your trajectories, you do have to do experimentation. You have to give up where you don't find it, and then you kind of 3, 4 steps. Both of you have taken 2 or 3 steps or even more probably to get to that stage, but not to give up on that is what I'm taking away. That don't give up on these 2 dimensions, otherwise you may end up being in a less than desirable position.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I don't think there's one answer, meaning I think I could be passionate about many things, right? And so find those things.
So Tim and Patrick, the other thing that's always on top of mind for people who are either in the early stages of the journey or thinking of taking a step like that is this big animal of risk, right? So this fear, risk, downside, all the things that people talk about, whether in whatever context. Can you tell us a little bit about what was the risk you took and how did you address that risk?
I think I want to take a stab at this because I think it's an interesting thing is Tim and I were both equity partners in Merkle. Okay. So there was a stock option program and there was an ability to purchase stock in the company. And, I was a big believer. I just always loved the equity and the ownership piece of it. It's a little bit like betting on yourself type of thing. But at Merkle, even better because I was working with a team full of people that were also betting, right? And we've tried to create the same environment at Blend where people are really betting on themselves and betting on each other. But with the risk part of it, I said to my wife, I said, hey, we started out in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we were having a pretty good life, and we were having some good fun there. And if some of this doesn't work out, we could wind up back kind of in that 2-bedroom apartment, but that's okay. It's a little bit about the journey. So in my mind, I always think about, well, what's the worst? How bad could this be? Right? What's the worst thing that's going to happen here? And kind of I take it like that. And I think the other part I would say to young entrepreneurs is just make sure you have that alignment in your home life, because I've seen it really hurt people before, where they wanted one thing and their spouse or significant other didn't want another thing, didn't want that same thing, and ultimately back to my thing, you got to make it all work. It's just not going to work. You're not going to have a happy home life, and I don't think that's worth risking for the chance you're going to take there. So I would say, really, my advice would be, make sure you have alignment. And then the risks aren't as, in my mind anyway, they're not really as big as people kind of make them out to be.
Very nice,
Yep.
Patrick. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I would add, I guess I would add there, first of all, there's risk. I don't want to seem like a cliche, which is if you don't take risks, you're not going to get anywhere. But I think that's true. There's risk everywhere, from taking new jobs to bringing on new partners, to doing new things, to standing up and even at Blend today saying, no, I really believe this is going to work for you. And I'm going to put my butt on the line, so to speak, to do that. All those things, all those risk things, as I look back on them now, I say, boy, thank God I took those risks. Thank God I took another job, because I feel good about where I was. And so it proved reward. But then I also say to myself, boy, if I would have gone another way, I might be in a similar position. I might be in a better position. I might be in a worse position. So I think a little bit risk is always there, assessing it, not being afraid of it. But also, even as Patrick was bringing up, making sure your family's involved in that. And I don't know, it's part of the journey. It's part of the journey. So I would say embrace it. Sometimes you have to take risks. Sometimes you don't.
Yeah, Puneet, I'm just thinking through this. I want to add this thing in here because I think it's kind of interesting. Is that if you say, there's a couple things that are going through my mind, is inside of failure, they tell you, is the answer to success. So it's okay to try stuff and not be successful, as long as you're learning from those things. And then I just was reading this book, and it talked about the law of serendipity. And the law of serendipity is lady luck favors those who try, right? So trying things, learning from things, and keeping going kind of it's like those are key components.
On that same note, Patrick and Tim, if you could tell, I mean, you have been tremendously successful, but what was a failure in your life? So reason I'm contrasting is, Patrick, people look at you, audience will hear you, successful guys always say, take risk, and it worked out for them. Is there some time you failed and really hurt? Tell us about that.
It's there's many failures along the way, or lessons learned. But like I was part of something where I was the lead executive on an acquisition that we had done. It was a decent sized acquisition back in the day, and I felt really good about that acquisition. And it was growing and making money right through the whole due diligence process. And it was going so good. I remember it was like March or April, that mid-month, I just said, snap the line. Let's just close it and pay him for that month, because I'm sure everything is going to keep going well. And then the monthly financials came in, those financials after we closed, and they had shrunk and lost money. And then for the following 6 months, I just watched that business whittle away, right? And in a way, as I step back and say, shit, I got to really look at what happened here and be honest about what it is I got right and what it is I missed, and then be really honest with the executive team about what was happening. This turned out to be a company that was focused on financial services. It was right before the 2008 financial crisis hit. It was like in the middle of that. They hadn't lost a client, but they lost tons of revenue. And some of their clients kind of went out of business. So, and that cost the company, money. It cost them stock value, and there were a lot of lessons to learn for me through that process, and I think the big lesson really was going back, taking an objective look at it, saying what I got right, what I got wrong, and how do we move forward. So that for me was one of the, as you asked me about failures, that was one that I said that jumps out in my mind for me.
Yeah, it's hard. When you use that word failure, it was hard for me to think about it because I view there's so many missteps and so many mistakes that I've made along the way. But failure is a big term for me. It's like I failed in something. But I can, some of the things I wish I would have done differently probably is I mentioned it earlier. I was doing really well at AT&T Bell Laboratories. I was in an environment where I was working well with people, and I took a job that was probably not the right job for me. And if I go back and look, I wish I would have done more due diligence around the culture that I was getting into, the management style of those people. And now, when I even sit here and I tell you this, I say it was a great experience because I learned so much from making that quote mistake that if you said, could I do it? Would I have done it over again? I'd have probably done it over again. Right. And but at the time it felt like a failure. And I complained to my wife about it and things like that. And so tons of failures. But I think that's one that sticks out as well.
I was going to say early days of Blend, and it would be a good thing for your entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs to kind of pay attention to. Wrong people on the team for building a company. So there's a certain mindset, there's a certain approach of that people have to have when building a company. And you can get people on that just are uncomfortable in that environment. They're not used to the struggles. They may come from a big company. They're not used to the small company. So I can remember early days of Blend having some people on the team that were not the right people for the journey we were on. They were the right people for other journeys, but not for the journey we were on. And if I say to myself, what's the mistake? Like Tim's point about failure, what's the mistake? What's the mistake? The mistake probably was didn't move fast enough on changing those people out and then getting the right people. And I can tell you, when you have the right people for that journey, even when we struggled, and we struggled very early with Blend in a big way, to the point where we were breaching our bank covenants, right? And before I started this company, I didn't even really know what a bank covenant was. Now, all of a sudden, my CFOs tell me I'm breaching a bank covenant. I'm like, oh my God. So, but then when you have the right people on your team, it's amazing how they can lift you up and they can work with you through it. And when you have the right partners on your team, like I can't tell you when I went to go talk to our bank executive at M&T, how they responded to that and how they helped us through it. Of course, you were open and honest with them, but I would think the mistake is not making a call early enough on people that are not in the right spot, because your fear is, well, who else am I going to get in that spot? What you're missing is the negative drag those people are going to have on you because they're in the wrong spot.
By the way, the last point, Patrick, you made, I see people struggle a lot with, because the confidence in the early stage is not only whether you'll get clients or not, but at least in services, whether you'll get the right people or not. And in that process, and even partners, like you said, external partners, people do take a suboptimal step saying that, okay, this is good enough.
And I know, Puneet, you were talking about partnerships. In the early days at Blend, Tim was actually over in Europe, still building out the company in Europe for our former company, and I was starting up Blend, and Tim had committed to kind of being a co-founder and a partner, but he had to finish his duties in Europe, right? So I said to Tim, that's fine, just kind of commit your money and we'll get going, right? And so I can remember in the early days, I'm like, oh my God, the company, we had bought a small company, they were going backwards. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. They're going back. They were doing great. Then we buy them. They're going backwards. We started the data science division organically. No customers had bought for 5 months. And we had a team that we had built. to kind of fulfill on the work. And I remember calling Tim saying, Jesus, Tim, the things just are not going well. And he said, Patrick, just relax. Just keep working. It's just money. If this thing doesn't work out, we'll figure something else out, right? We had another one of our co-founders, Oscar Dugan. I can't tell you what an optimist and a hard worker Oz is, right? And have those people kind of in your corner as you go through those times is kind of a huge thing.
No, this thing I would just highlight that both because of, as I said, one of the themes of this is power of partnership, and this you have highlighted not only like Tim and you, but it seems like this philosophy goes deeper. And just before we move on risk, I did hear, and I'm putting words kind of to your stories. One thing that Tim, you mentioned when you reacted, failure is not a word that connected with you. I think I had read somewhere that fear is actually excitement if you just label it correctly. Because fear, like when you jump skydiving, I mean, if fear is very close to an excitement, if you can frame your mind that you don't look at fear as fear but excitement, and Patrick, to your point, failure not as a failure but a lesson, then you have a very long lasting power, which is what you focus.
There's a story. It's all how you take things. Like I was thinking about this story. Lou Holtz, he was the old-time coach for Notre Dame football, and he was saying it was February one year, and he had a house fire, and they lost a lot of things in their house, and he had like some great things, like pictures of him with presidents and just really cool stuff. Anyway, the house burns down. It's like January or February, and he says to his wife, "Well, the bad news is the house burned down, but the good news is we have 3 tragedies a year, and we've already gotten one over with, and it's only January." So I think how you take things and put them in perspective is good.
Now, moving to positive side, Tim and Patrick, what would make you really happy, feel you successful about Blend? I mean, they would both, and it has 2 elements. One is obviously size and revenue, etc., and some of it is private, so no need to go there. The other is that impact it would have, both on the industry and, I think, knowing you well, on your people, because I know that always has been a priority for you. So tell us a little bit about what would be success for you going forward in Blend.
Yeah. So let me take a shot, and then you can jump in, because it's a big question. There's multiple things that as I look at what would make Blend successful, what I would feel successful, it's multi-pronged. One clear area is at least it's the client impact and the satisfaction. What I'm proud of is when we're doing a client meeting, or we're doing a presentation of some time, or we're engaged with a client, and they're telling us how Blend has helped drive their business forward, right? And I don't know, it's just something that's even more of a personal thing, which I say, I don't even care if we're until we hit bank covenants. I don't care if we're making money. I don't, if our clients are really excited about what we do, and that we're driving an impact, that drives my juices forward, and it's a big part of the success factor at Blend. And then employees as well, for sure, right? If we can, there's a lot of proud things that happen when we see our employees get promoted. We have an all-star program. Our all-star program hires people right out of college. And then for 6 months, we put them through a bit of training and on the job, and we have a graduation. And not everybody makes the graduation, but boy, when that graduation happens, it's a proud moment for both Patrick and I to say, hey, we continue to provide opportunities for our employees when we're able to grow and find new career paths for our even mid-level people. When we see a VP get promoted to SVP, all really exciting to us. And so I'll stop with all my passion and let Patrick chime in there as well.
That's good. No, I think I as I thought about success, I wrote some of those same bullet points down that Tim had mentioned. And I was thinking, like, I don't really think of, when will I know we're successful, right? Like I think of like these like really cool milestones along the way. You know what I mean? Like the day we crossed 100 people on the team. The day we crossed 1,000 people, when we started an international footprint in Europe, when we opened up our delivery center in India, like there's these really cool milestones along the way. When we got, when we went to go get a financial partner, we got like world-class company, like recognized to kind of look at us and want to invest in us. Like, so there's these really cool milestones along the way. But I think as we project out further, being a leader kind of in the AI space, having our team do really well and continue to, like, one thing in a growth company, it's great that people kind of, their careers continue to go higher and higher. So I think all those kind of things are important, and it's kind of a journey. Like I think a little bit like one of the things I like to say is like at some point, Accenture was a group of people like us sitting around saying, how do we keep growing this company? How do we keep being a valuable company, right? And all the great companies, so go whatever great company you want. At some point, they had to start someplace and start growing it, right? And so that's kind of our journey, and let's see how far we can take this thing.
Now, switching again, other side of it, what keeps you awake at night as far as Blend goes? I mean, what are the things that you feel are, as every time you grow, you cross into a next orbit, right? And
Yeah.
you, like video games, right? You move from
Yeah.
one type of game to another type of game. What's the thing that you feel is the thing that if you could fix, or you could change, fix is wrong word, you could change,
Yeah.
would take you to the next curve of Blend?
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead, Tim?
Yeah. So I get that question a lot. What keeps you? And I always like to say I sleep really, really well. It's one of my superpowers. So I don't. Nothing keeps me up at night. But the spirit of the question, of course, is there's a lot of things that as you build and grow a business, you're worried about. A lot of things you're excited about. I think the thing that kind of from my perspective is as we've grown really nicely. And I think we talk about going through evolutions and revolutions. And there's points as you grow a business, you go from, 5 million to 20 million and all hell breaks loose. And you got to be able to create a different platform or approach to keep that evolution going. And then you get through the 20 million and then you hit 70 million and another evolution happens. And so as we're growing so quickly, what keeps me up is making sure that we are constantly evolving and getting through those revolutions to create a platform for our employees, for our clients to keep growing. And so with each new day is a new time in our lives to be able to, for Patrick and I to be able to say, okay, we got to keep evolving. We got to not only from a go-to-market, but also an operating model. And so.
Yeah, it's good. So I guess the anxiety I get is around, are we capitalizing on all the opportunities out there? Are we going fast enough? Like, that's where my angst always comes from. Like, why can't we go faster, faster, faster? But I think, we're doing great and we're growing well. And so let's just keep going. But the anxiety is, how do we keep being at the forefront and being kind of in the center of the storm? And then the other thing is, I think it's really hard, Puneet, to figure this one out, is you want to have, everyone talks about a great company and a great culture. And like, how do you really do that at scale, right? It's really kind of an interesting challenge to figure out, right? So as Tim said, look, at 20 people, you could do it a certain way. At 50 people a certain way, 100 people a certain way, 1,000 people is a different challenge, 5,000 is a different challenge. So I think Tim and I are constantly kind of working on that. And so that gets that, I don't know, keep me up at night, but my anxiety is there. And I think how we think about that is, I'm not sure if I can I don't mean to use any curse words on your podcast, but Tim would call a lot of culture stuff happy horseshit, right? And we don't want to be a happy horseshit company. But we want to really have this kind of good vibe and people feeling great about what they're doing. So we kind of hone in on this is culture equals behaviors. Okay. And then how do we keep driving those right levels of behaviors for us, which is really, I guess it comes down to three things: is passion about getting and developing great people, right? Just having the best people. Two, as Tim mentioned, the customer is the hero of the story. Like, and our behaviors have to be such that, hey, if a customer's not happy with something, we want our team to feel empowered to say, you know what? We're not going to charge you for that. And we're going to redo it, and we're going to make sure you're happy, right? And it's not just Tim and I saying, it's the team being able to kind of be empowered to do that. And then we have this kind of growth mindset. Like, how do we keep innovating? How do we keep growing? We're in a great space called AI today. And, we think that's going to have a good long run to it. But at some point, if this company's going to evolve and be around for a long time, it's going to have to adapt to the next new thing. So I guess that the cultural dynamic of the company is a thing.
Yeah, Patrick, the summary of three you gave is definitely a headline worthy set of points, because across the board, what I hear from entrepreneurs who are successful like you is they worry most about retaining the culture as
Yeah.
more capital and more growth comes in. When 1,000 becomes 10,000, then
Yeah.
you don't know each leader, you don't even know each middle manager. And how do
Yeah.
you still have them kind of behave in a way which is consistent with the original ethos of the
Yeah.
company? That keeps
And
coming up as a common theme.
there, I think you really have to define what culture is, because I would argue you can't retain the same culture. But if culture is the core ethos that Patrick just talked about, yes. But I can't tell you, I mean, as we grew through Merkle, that I would argue that parts of that culture had to change and did change in order to do it. And so it's a play on words a little bit. The core thing of what you're trying to do, it's got to remain the same, but lots of things changes around it.
The core thing, all the words are words, Tim, but I took away the core thing, three things that Patrick said: passion, growth mindset, and client centricity.
Yeah.
Those you can call whatever word you use, but those seem to be, even Tim, when you were talking about this client centricity, I said that what are you most proud of? It was you brought out client centricity.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
right. I think it's looking at those things and saying, what can I do at scale? Like, I remember we got to a certain point and I was hearing that our onboarding process of people coming on wasn't great because, you're growing 50, 60, 70, 80% a clip, right? And I just was thinking back to the early days when you're 10 people, 20 people, and you add a person onto the team. Like, what happens? That person gets a big welcome. The team takes them out for lunch. You talk to them about what's going on with the company. Like, you really engage them, right? Now, all of a sudden, you're adding, 50, 60, 70 people on in a given month. The thing to focus on for your culture, in my mind, was we formed a task force to say, I want to go through what our onboarding process is. Is somebody welcoming this person? Is the team taking them out to lunch, right? Are we giving them like a set of blend gear that's kind of a nice, like a good, like not like, tchotchke stuff, but like good blend gear they would be proud to have, right? And if it's a remote person, how do we kind of do a remote take them out to lunch? So I think focusing on the behaviors in those core things is kind of a way to ensure your culture can kind of be alive there. But I do think the more you grow, the more locations you have, the harder that gets.
Before I get into the rapid fire and switch to more little bit personal, little more fun things, just would love to hear both Tim and Patrick from you. And I hope if there was I could shut one person from hearing what others said, I would have done it, but that's too much technology. So tell me, Patrick, what is blend? What is blend to you? Just describe to me in like, and this is for our audience also, because they go to website, etc. But what is blend to you?
Blend to me is it's the power of vision coming to life. So like I have a saying where I say, tell the world your dreams and the world will conspire to help you fulfill those dreams. Okay. So to me, blend is a fulfillment of this idea that we want to build a killer professional services firm that's filled with elite people using data, tech, and analytics to optimize business performance. Right. And we want to be a world-class company. So in a lot of ways, that's just us painting this vision. And then what's coming to life for me about what Blend is actually a company filled with those people with great clients doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
Nice.
Boy,
Tim,
it's
what
going to be
about
hard
you?
for me to respond to that because there's so much overlap. So I'll try to summarize and say, Blend to me is a company that is hiring great people to help our clients navigate the AI landscape. There's so much stuff going on around there. There's noise, there's new technologies, there's new ways of doing things. And I love the fact that we're creating a company that has people, and those people are helping our clients navigate that.
Very well said, Tim. Very well said. And I could see the overlap. I mean, it's and not
Yeah.
surprising. So
Yeah.
with that, let me just switch to a little more personal, little more fun side.
Yeah.
So Patrick, question is for you. What Tim claimed his superpower is that he can sleep well. But what is his professional superpower according to you, which you just admire and thrive on? And I'll ask the opposite side of it as well. But what is
Yeah.
that? What does
Well,
Tim do?
Tim wanted, you'd be hard pressed to find a guy that's better at developing a strategy to kind of solve a problem. Like Tim's kind of strategic mindset, to come in and kind of figure out what the problem is, what to put in place, kind of to solve that, and then to make sure it gets driven through. And like the analytical mindset, like Tim said something early, which I just love, is I'm going to take these actions and I'm going to predict I'm going to get these results. So it's really focusing in on what are those actions I'm going to take to kind of drive those results. And then I would just say, Tim, from a leadership perspective, really, the team, he's just a great kind of team guy and a team leader where people really rally behind and enjoy working with him. So I think those are kind of his superpowers. Yeah.
Perfect, Patrick. And then the other side, and this is your chance. You may be polite. It doesn't seem like that in your meetings, but what would you think that if Tim could change or adjust, that will make your life
Like a
easier?
360 review here. I like it.
Oh my
Yes.
God, Tim! It's funny. Sometimes I say that question. So the questions from me about Tim. One of the things that I always like to tell stories, Puneet, to kind of bring my point across. But in the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury leaves the band Kiss at one point, right? And then he comes back to Queen, and they start making good music together. And he says to the guys, he goes, the problem I was having with those other guys? He says, they listened to everything I said, right? He says, when I come back to you guys, you won't listen to anything I say, and you're making it work with the pushback, right? So sometimes I wish Tim just wouldn't have to give me so much pushback on some of my ideas and just go along with me now and again.
Tim, now your turn for the same questions. What is a
Yeah.
Patrick superpower, and what's the irritating power?
Yeah, it's pretty easy for at least a superpower. Superpower for Patrick is his ability to get a group of people together to solve problems. And nothing is too big for him. So if it amazes me when we have a problem, I tend to internalize things and I tend to try to think through them myself. Patrick gets the smartest people he knows around, puts the solution together, and his ability to mobilize that team, second to none there. And so, and then I guess I get the flip side. The flip side of that, it's a little bit, there's two dimensions to that. One's the opposite of that, which is we like to use this $1 bill versus $100 bill. Are we dealing with a $100 bill, or are we dealing with a $1 bill? And when Patrick has a problem to solve, he just wants to solve it, and sometimes gets lost into that. It's only a $10 bill, and we got a good enough solution versus the perfect solution there. So sometimes they tell him, "You got it, Patrick. Let's move on. You got it."
Move on.
So
That's true.
By the way, Patrick
That's
and
true.
Tim, I have to, I just listening as an outsider, I can see the power of your partnership, because many times when you ask people what's your partner's weakness, it's like one of those weaknesses, he works too hard. But you guys
I
were
hate
pretty honest about each other's weaknesses. Um,
yeah.
Patrick, what would your spouse say about Tim? What does she think about Tim?
Oh yeah. Well, one, she loves Tim. She's highly regards Tim. So I think she would say about him, one is she just thinks, I think on the really positive, he's just been a great partner, and we've had a great friendship. And I would say she would just really considering him a very close friend of mine. And a lot of times we say you guys are best friends. So the and then I think she probably she listens to me when I say Tim's driving me crazy because I can't convince him of doing the A, B, or C. But yeah, I think she has a really high, very high good things to say about Tim.
And Tim, what about you?
Yep, yep. A ditto in many ways. I think the big thing that she keeps talking about over the years is the strengths of Patrick's are different than my strengths. And I think she recognizes, and if I'm frustrated, she also recognizes Patrick brings a different point of view to the conversation. And so I think that she recognizes I remember when we were when I was in London, and Patrick and I were not two in a box. And she said, maybe you need to call Patrick on this because this isn't your strength. And so.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's good. It's good. Even like I was thinking about this, Puneet, I was dealing with some issue that was kind of a family issue just this past weekend. And I said to Sharon, let me just see what Tim thinks about it. She's like, yeah, good idea. See what he thinks.
That's
Yeah.
great. Although in my life that can sometimes become irritating because sometimes there are some friends who my wife values their opinion more than mine.
There you go.
That's a
Good point.
different. First thing, what's your favorite quote? And I would switch them around, not the same question to you. So, Tim, what's your favorite quote which inspires you a lot?
To infinity and beyond.
And Patrick, favorite book? You can take two if it's tough.
Oh, favorite book, God, so many of them. I think my favorite business book was Good to Great. Yeah.
One is good enough. And Tim, back to you. What's your favorite thing to do? If you had no constraint on time or nothing to do, what would you pick up to do first? What's your favorite thing to do?
I like to play hockey. And so
really?
I really find a lot of enjoyment playing ice hockey. And so that's what I would choose there.
Yeah.
And
Puneet,
Patrick,
The Alchemist. The Alchemist was my other book.
Oh, Alchemist, of course. So, Patrick, back to you. Any heroes, anybody who you think is like the guy or the girl that you really admire?
Heroes. I don't know. I don't really heroes because I think my opinion is everyone's got kind of strengths and weaknesses. And I don't really try to kind of idolize anybody, but I like to learn from tons of different people.
So who do you see is like someone you have learned a lot from?
Well, I've learned a lot, certainly in my career from my old CEO, David Williams. Yeah, I think that would be just like a personal learning. Otherwise, it's just tons of books I read, Puneet, that give me some information.
Now, this question will be for both of you. Like, what is one thing that people generally don't know about you? Just Tim, starting with you, like something that you think it's maybe a tattoo of a dragon on your back or whatever it is, but what's one thing that people don't know about you?
There's a lot, but I would say, I'll go back to sports again, that I was in high school, I was a gymnast. And so when I tell people that, they're stunned by that based on me playing hockey. And, I'm not the characteristic of a gymnast. So.
Yeah. Nice. What about you, Patrick?
Yeah, and going back, Puneet, to the admired people I was getting. Ronald Reagan's a guy I admired as a young guy growing up.
Patrick keeps going back to questions you've already asked. This is rapid fire.
I know it's rapid fire.
No, that's
my mind works is that I didn't want to say his name because I hate bringing up any form of politics in today's world. But what I admired about Ronald Reagan was the happy warrior, right? I'm a positive guy, but I got shit to do and I'm going to get it done. So anyway, Ronald Reagan was there. And then what people might not know about me was my dad was an Irish immigrant, was a bus driver in New York and a bus mechanic for the Manhattan Transit Authority. And I grew up in 1 square mile with 24 other Irish American cousins.
Wow. Well, that's good and maybe challenging at times, but I
Yeah,
can see
yes.
that. And the last question for you, both of you, the same question. And I know it's a little bit of a question which will require a little thinking. Is what has been, Tim, your luckiest break in life? What has been your luckiest break?
My luckiest break. So I would say that meeting my wife.
No, Tim, I should have said that is obviously there. I mean, I'm talking after that, beyond that.
Yeah, meeting luckiest break in life.
Yes.
Luckiest break in life. Well, it's hard for me because I put it in a business perspective and then I put it in my life. So I'm going to step out of the business world because we're in a business and interview. And my biggest break in life, Jesus, so intertwined. So I would say is finding and ending up working at Merkle, getting the break to find that job. It was a $10 million company. I don't know even how I stumbled on it. And where I would be today without that experience and engagement is so there was a lot of luck involved in that. Right? So it's more on the business side.
And
of
Tim, I'll
course,
just build on that.
Of course, in case my wife's watching, the lucky is my wife was the
I should
luckiest
have
break.
caveated that as the
That's
second.
not
I
right.
should change this question
Not
to
right.
second luckiest break. Yeah, but Tim, I'll tie it to one thing just because it's following on Patrick's lead. I'm now interjecting. Is this that I think you talked about risk, right? So, and it luckily came out that your luckiest break, your second luckiest break, is a risk you took on a company at that time. Merkle could have not done what it became. So your risk was your luckiest break, and that's something I wanted to highlight. It automatically came out.
For sure. That
what
was a
about you, Patrick?
huge decision. That was a huge decision we had to make. We were living in Dallas. The job was in Maryland. It was a small company. And my wife is like, why are we pulling our whole family from Dallas to go to Maryland to work for a company I've never heard of? So yes, it was a big risk.
It's good.
Patrick, for you?
So
second luckiest.
Hey, Tim. Yeah, Tim put me on my spot. So yes, my wife is the love of my life as well. So that was that needs to be said in case this thing gets aired. But when I think about lucky breaks, Puneet, these are things that you're not necessarily kind of in control of. But I do think where I was raised, how I was raised was a real that's something that I was very fortunate to have. And I was thinking back when I was a young guy. For some reason, this is when I'm in grammar school. One of the fathers of my friends had asked me, did I want to get part of starting a business, like a costume jewelry business with him and his son. And it was like, and when I think back about my life, I'm like, that was such a good break because I got to understand. We went into New York. We found wholesalers. We bought some jewelry. We bought it back to the PTA. We had to present it. We had to talk to the people about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And I think that early experience just opened my eyes to kind of how business kind of worked and got me excited by it at a very young age. And I think from that moment on, I was going to be on some journey to kind of what Tim and I are doing today.
Very, very well put, Patrick. So I think with this, we are at the end of this, but really appreciate, folks. I think this has been really good discussion. I learned a lot, and I hope that our audience will also, benefit from your excellent journey. And I'm sure there's maybe we'll do it 5 years from now, and there will be a new chapter added to this.
And Puneet, I must say before we sign off, you're definitely in the story of Blend have been a very kind of positive character into our story, and it actually helped us develop and build a company in a better way. So just through our engagement with you, through your advice, through your understanding of the industry and where it's going, you've been very helpful there. So we appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Patrick.